your support as we go through this. So thank you for being here. Number 2, we have a public hearing, fiscal year 2022 tentative budget. Is there a motion to open a public hearing?
Mr. Chair, Jeff Silverstone, I move to open the public hearing on the tentative budget.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chair, Andy Bierman, I'll second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are in a public hearing. Thank you very much. Cam, do you want to run with this?
Sure, we have space at our office for the public to attend. We also followed state law, notified the public through the Utah Public Notice website. I am looking at the virtual attendance, and it's just league staff. Jaden is our new legal intern who we're excited to have this summer, and then Nick is Nick. Nick, is there anybody downstairs?
There is not, but that other Nick is their way in if they did come in person. So nope, there's no one attending.
Okay, Mayor Caldwell, there's no public input on in this budget hearing.
Mr. Chair, I will move, Jeff Silverstone, I will move to close the public hearing.
Mayor Niehaus will second.
Okay, thank you. First and a second. All in favor to close the public hearing, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. With that, we will move on to number 3, administrative items. We have review and approval of minutes and a call for a conflict of interest disclosure. Let's go with the conflict interest disclosure first. Does anybody have a conflict they would like to announce? Okay, hearing none, we'd accept a motion to approve the minutes.
Mr. Chair, Clint Smith, I'll motion to approve.
Michelle Randall, second.
Thank you. We have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, those minutes are approved. Thank you. That will take us to number 4, Utah League of Cities and Towns Board and Commission reports and appointments. Abby.
Okay, so the first one I will go over, it is the Utah State Retirement. One second here. So that one, we would like to reappoint Jamie Davidson. He is the Orange City Manager. That is a 4-year term. It would be 2021 to 2025. So if we want to approve that one real quick.
Michelle Randall, so moved.
We have a second.
Carrie Malkovich, second.
Thank you very much. We have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. That passes.
Perfect. Okay, second one we have here is the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission. That one was recently created this past legislative session. Mayor Dawn Ramsey of South Jordan, she's expressed interest, and we would like to recommend her to the governor's office for this position. So we will need board approval on this one as well.
Is there a motion to recommend Mayor Dawn Ramsey to this?
I'm happy to make that motion. Mayor
Can I
Niehaus.
ask a question?
Please.
Just out of curiosity, does staff maintain a list for us of who represents the league on these different governor or senate appointments that we have? I know that everybody's got different capacities and interest in participating, some a lot more than others. And I know I work with Mayor Ramsey and Mayor Silvestrini and wearing a couple of hats in different boards and commissions. And I was just wondering if the staff just does that balancing on their own, or if that's something you could share with us.
So I have everything listed out in a spreadsheet. It's posted on our website, but I can also email it to you.
Mayor Mendenhall, Jeff Silverstone, can I address your concern?
Well, I didn't state
Okay.
it as a concern exactly, Jeff, but of course.
Yeah, well, let me just say that I think that one of the reasons that we thought Mayor Ramsey would be good for this position is her dual role as an officer of the league, as well as being on the Wasatch Front Regional Council. So she does bring the ability to coordinate, from those two organizations. And this commission is new, but we wanted to have somebody that has, a breadth of resources, I guess, to be able to represent us on this. That was, I think, is the thinking and why Mayor Ramsey is wanting to serve on this. But
Mayor Mendenhall, let me add one other thing. Abby referenced the massive list that we keep. Every year, the legislature adds more and more task forces and commissions that we have to fill. So when I became director, we tried to formalize the process by bringing all of these to the league board. That had never happened before, so that this type of conversation could happen, to make sure that we've got the right people in the right places. On our website, we have listed every board and commission for which the league is responsible. And then we try to stay on top of those as much as possible, because a lot of legislation will originate in these boards and commissions. So in fact, Susan just dropped the link in so you can see all of the current appointments that we have, ranging from the Indigent Defense Commission to the Seismic Safety Commission to the Quality Growth Commission that you serve on, and others. So it's, frankly, we could have a full-time staffer doing nothing but tracking state boards and commissions. Abby does it on top of her normal duties, so we can try to stay abreast of what's happening where.
Thanks for sharing that, Abby. And I'll just make a note that I'm no longer on the Quality Growth Commission. Y'all have replaced me. So
Yes, we have. So we'll get that updated. I think we're just waiting for some more confirmation, but I will make sure that's changed, as well as Jenny Reese is no longer on Quality Growth.
Yeah, silly term.
And then third one is the Commission on Housing Affordability. Cam wanted to kind of run over that, make some comments. So Cam, if you wanted to go over those.
Yep, perfect, thank you.
Cam, that I interrupted the vote on that one. So I think
Oh,
we need
sorry.
to go back.
We did have a first from Mayor Niehaus. Is there a second for the Economic Opportunity
I'll
Commission?
second that, Nick.
Okay, first and second, thank you very much. All in favor, say aye.
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 Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. That appointment passes.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mayor, for getting us back to the vote there. With the Commission on Housing Affordability, much of today's discussion is going to revolve around that commission. Currently, the league has two appointments, Lehigh Council Member Chris Condi and former Salt Lake City Council Member turned Senior Advisor Andrew Johnston. We're anticipating a vacancy, but we don't yet have the names in place for the board to consider. I've been in touch with multiple interested elected officials, but we're still trying to get all those ducks in a row. So our recommendation is not to make any replacement today, but to coordinate with the officers over the next, hopefully this week, to finalize the path forward with the anticipated vacancy there.
Okay, so no action required, Cam?
Nope, not on that one yet.
Okay.
And then the final one is the Utah Outdoor Adventure Commission. This one I just wanted to update the board on. We originally were going to make this appointment last year. Then unfortunately the commission was defunded just due to different COVID budget issues. But now they're back on. So the league has one appointment to this board, as well as a joint appointment with the Utah Association of Counties. When we were looking at our candidates last year, we were looking at Bountiful City Council Member Kate Bradshaw. So once we coordinate with UAC and kind of go through our candidates again, we will get back to you guys and we will look for your recommendations coming up in June.
And so Mayor Caldwell, let me add one other piece on this one. Yeah, the purpose of this outdoor recreation commission really is to create a strategic vision for all of the outdoor recreation assets that exist in Utah, ranging from large scale state or federal projects to local government efforts. So we see this really as a quality of life type commission. When we advertised for it last year, we had a bunch of great candidates. Initially, we were only going to have one spot, and the counties were going to have one spot. I met with Representative Stenquist, who is the bill sponsor, now 2 sessions ago, and told him that there needed to be more local government representation of the outdoor rec challenges in rural Utah are different than those in urban Utah, greenbelt versus foothills, et cetera, et cetera. And he agreed, but there were a bunch of different groups all trying to get representation. So the compromise we reached was the league had one, UAC had one, and then we had a joint one between the league and UAC. To my knowledge, that's never been done before, but it was a way to get another local government voice. So we took our list of applicants to UAC. UAC brought their list of applicants to us. We haven't been able to come up with somebody yet that could check both boxes. So if you have suggestions of people who you think could get support of UAC and the league to serve on this task force, let us know. It does plan to start up at some point this summer.
May I ask a question or make a statement?
Please.
I think it would be really beneficial to have somebody that is in an emerging city or town as opposed to a more established or mature outdoor recreation or outdoor adventure area. Only because I think that it's about, it seems like it's going to be about, if you're talking about quality of life, it's about, growing the outdoor adventure opportunities for Utahns and likely for visitors as well. And so it just might be nice when we think of, folks talking about outdoor rec. It might be nice to have an emerging city or town leader or region leader as opposed to a more mature. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you. If you have recommendations, please send them to Cam or Abby, and let's make sure we've got good representation on that. I think we all collectively agree that that's really important along certainly the Wasatch Front and in our recreation communities. We're going to see that increase dramatically in the next little while, and we have seen it already. So I think it's an important voice to be had. So please get in contact with the league staff and forward your recommendations if you have them. Cam, anything else to add on number 4?
Nope, that's it. Let me also just welcome those who joined a little late. I also want to welcome Mayor Young. Hopefully you're feeling better, Mayor. You look better on screen, but hopefully you're feeling better too.
Thanks, Cameron. Appreciate it.
So Mayor Caldwell, that's all for.
Thank you. That'll take us to number 5, the fiscal year 2022 tentative budget. Cam and Nick, it's your show.
Terrific. Thank you. And thank you all for your feedback over the last 3 meetings as we've been leading up to the tentative budget adoption today. We'll take a couple of moments to walk through the highlights and then open it up for questions about the tentative budget. So Nick, as Chief Operating Officer, will you hit the highlights?
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Cam. First, I want to draw your attention to the budget itself and point out the structure for you. So we did amend our budget this year. We included in this document a comparison to both our adopted budget, which is a little closer to a regular year, and our amended budget. Just so you get we only have to include our current budget, which is our amended budget, but we wanted you to be able to get a sense of what this looks like in a normal year. You'll see throughout the memo as well, we have included both comparisons to the adopted budget and amended budget. First off, by the numbers, the proposed fiscal year 22 budget is $3,224,000, of which is $2,864,000 is ongoing revenue and $360,000 coming from reserves. To go through that very quickly, you unfroze the dues and implemented a $500 minimum dues amount. We are budgeting, that total came to about $2,022,000. We are budgeting for 99% membership. So we have included $1,917,000 of those dues that you've approved. With live events coming back, we expect to have our registration fees and exhibitor revenue shoot back up. So we are planning on that. And just a note on the reserves that we are including. The previous year, we included $258,000 for organization, modernization, and unknown expenses. We had our sponsors stick with us this year to the full amount, while we only had about half of the events, 1.5 that they're used to. For that reason, our expenses and events were way down, but our sponsor revenue is up. So we have more reserves according to our policy that we do want to spend down. We'll be investing those again in organization modernization as we see what our new normal looks like, and also in particular line items to address research, engagement, and advocacy.
Nick, can I add one other piece there?
Yes.
So when we all met at the aquarium in Draper, which seems like a lifetime ago now, but that's when you as a board outlined some strategic goals that we continue to try to execute, and also authorize the creation of the position that became Katie Harley. Katie did a magnificent job organizing the mid-year conference. And in addition to her great work with mid-year, she also successfully recruited additional sponsors last year, even though we did not have in-person events. So that's in part why we have this one-time extra money that would go into reserves from this year that we are then plugging into next year's budget, because we had that extra revenue that was sponsor and conference based from last year, that with the lower expenses from not doing an in-person annual convention. So your creation of Katie's position has paid dividends, both with the quality of the mid-year conference, which was her first conference, as well as with that relationship building with sponsors, which gives us some flexibility with those one-time dollars going into next year.
Hear, hear. Well done, board, on creating Katie's position, and well done, Katie, in executing. On to some of our expenses. As pledged, we are using the new ongoing funds from unfreezing the dues to increase the leg team's bandwidth, to replace our former Dave Church position, and also to see some both merit-based and market-based adjustments for current staff. Also, we are hiring an additional legislative research analyst. So that is where most the additional ongoing revenue will be placed. Like we said, we have those reserves coming in that will go to organization modernization and other one-time investments that you'll see throughout the budget. You'll also see an additional line called legal services. We had legal expenses before, and some of the stuff in personnel. Legal services is the line item that we are going to replace. That will be the Dave Church replacement line item. And Cam, I don't know how far you'd like to go into where we're at there, but that is something that as a service to members, we've pulled it out as its own line item. You'll see $100,000 budgeted for it there. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Cam? Okay. As you will see, to conclude, we've made it through one of the weirdest years on record, a year without precedent. And we'd like to thank you, the board, all of our members, our sponsors, all of our staff for the dedication and sticking through this year. We think we're in a great position coming out to a new normal, however new that may be. And we're poised to make the adjustments we need to make in this new normal in fiscal year 22. So with that, if you have any questions, or Cam, if there's anything you'd like to add to this conversation, we're happy to answer them.
I'll add one more thing, Mayor Caldwell, and that is that this does not contemplate any American Rescue Plan dollars in the ongoing budget. So when we get to that point in a moment, we're contemplating requesting that cities share, as we talked at the April board meeting, a small amount to help provide those services, because every minute we spend helping cities on ARP is a minute that's not being spent on the other legislative advocacy work. And so, but that is separate from the ongoing expenses of the budget. So I just wanted to clarify that before we left the budget and went to ARP. So Mayor Caldwell, we're happy to take whatever questions the board has about the tentative budget.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you. So Cameron or Nick, I'm just curious whether you've had any feedback since our last board meeting about the prospect about the $500 minimum to pay for the attorney's expenses. Is that, anybody commented you on that at all?
Well, I want to thank Mayor Castleton, because Mayor Castleton did a tremendous amount of work up front, reaching out to his fellow towns and small cities. And we've already been receiving $500 checks. In fact, the first check that came in for dues for the upcoming year was a $500 check. So I think Mayor Castleton's outreach and explanation has paid a lot of dividends. Mayor Castleton, is there anything that you'd like to add as the town rep on the board?
No, I think we covered it pretty good. Like I say, like you said, everybody was in favor of it. They like to have the idea of having somebody to fall back on for some of the legal stuff for some of the smaller towns. So I think it was very well received by everybody that I heard from.
I'm happy to hear that. Thank you.
That's a great question. Any other questions? Mayor Castleton, we appreciate your work on that. Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Chair, Jeff Silverstein, I will make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the budget as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
This is Dawn Ramsey. I'll second.
Thank you, Mayor. First and a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. That passes. That will take us on to number 6, advocacy, engagement, and outreach update. Victoria and Wayne and Cam, I guess, the whole team.
Perfect. Before I turn it over to the Ledge team, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your support, for your leadership during a crazy year. We are confident that the budget you just approved, the tentative budget you just approved, will give us the flexibility we need to meet all of the moving parts, many of which we're about to discuss on the advocacy side. Between now and June, we'll be meeting with our staff and kind of putting the finishing touches on the personnel pieces, so that when you approve the final budget in June, it's all ready to go. Speaking of next year, we also are already meeting as staff to build the foundation for the annual conference, September 29th through October 1st. So we gave the staff the weekend off basically after mid-year, and then it was right back at it for annual. In fact, Katie and I carpooled back from St. George, and I told her we want to talk about annual at all on the car ride, and Katie can confirm that I fulfilled my promise, and then we were talking first thing Monday morning. If you have feedback as board members about theme, keynotes, workshops, mobile tours, any of the above, please let us know. We'll be asking for suggestions from the general membership in the weeks ahead. But if you have thoughts of what you'd like to accomplish at the annual conference, shoot us an email and we'll add it to the queue as we start these planning meetings. So I just wanted to make that pitch for your participation that way. With that, Mayor Caldwell, let's jump into advocacy, engagement, and outreach. And we have a couple of primary objectives here. Number one is to finalize the plan of attack on the American Rescue Plan. Wayne Bradshaw will update you on that. The dialogue we had in April was very helpful. We've incorporated your feedback into this proposal. The second will be related to the Commission on Housing Affordability. The co-chairs of that committee will be here in about 50 minutes. And we have a draft wish list that we've put together and want to have a strategic conversation about the next steps on that wish list. One thing that is not on this agenda, not for lack of trying, but just due to time, was we've extended an invitation to former Senate President Wayne Niederhauser to come meet with the league board to talk about homelessness. We weren't able to make the schedules work for today, so we're still shooting for that for the June meeting. So with that being said, Wayne, I'll turn it over to you to walk through our proposed plan of attack on the American Rescue Plan.
Thanks, Cam. And just a quick refresher from our board meeting in April. The American Rescue Plan is providing direct funding to all cities, towns, and counties across the country. And so every city, town in the state of Utah is going to receive a direct funding amount from the federal government that is not a competitive grant, but does have quite a bit of guidance and potential restrictions on how you can use that funding. The overarching uses are economic revitalization, household assistance, small business assistance, similar expenses under the CARES funding. You can provide premium pay to your essential workers. And in the guidance, you can also provide premium pay to private sector essential workers. So you can grant that money to a private business to provide an increase in pay as well. You can do revenue replacement and then invest in sewer, water, and broadband infrastructure. Last week, the Treasury offered additional guidance and clarification on those allowable uses. There's 151 pages of guidance, and this is called the interim final rule. And what that means is for the next 60 days, this interim rule is in place and has enforceable on how you use your funds. But based on comments that they received from the public, from other cities and towns, from NLC, they can update that rule and make changes. So there's potential changes in 60 days from now. And then they also stated that it will be rolling guidance. Within that current rule, they reference a lot of other agency federal definitions. So when looking at who you should provide assistance to, they cite the qualified census tract as where you should target your funds. And if not, you should provide justification for why you targeted other residents in your city. For general revenue, they've used the census definition. So right now it excludes your utility revenue. It's only kind of what the census is defined as your general revenue when determining revenue loss. And then when it comes to sewer and water projects, they refer to the EPA standards. So if it's a project that would qualify under the Clean Water State Revolving Fund or the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, you can use your ARP funds for these projects. Now, it doesn't have to be on the list that the state has for these funds, but it has to meet the similar standards that the EPA spells out for these revolving funds. And there is, in those 150 pages, a lot of requirements for justifications of how you use the funds and documentation. And then you have until 2024 to obligate your funds, but you can spend it and clear until 2026, which is new from the legislation. Everyone will have to provide an annual report. So from Scipio to Salt Lake City, there has to be an annual report. As you grow in size and the amount of money you received, there are additional reporting requirements and additional standards, but again, every city and town will have to provide an annual report to Treasury. As well as we have spoken with the state, and they are going to authorize some matching funds with their ARP funds. So there will also be an application and reporting. And the reason I just run through all of this is, again, to emphasize the amount of kind of expertise and technical assistance that is going to be required through this process. This should look familiar. This is the framework in which we are trying to educate and drive the membership on how to target and spend their ARP funds. This is also what we built. We have submitted a letter to GOPB as well as the chairs of the executive appropriations that will comply with SB3 item 165, which is basically we have to state how we plan to utilize these funds as local governments. And so they will release B and C road funds. We've submitted that letter. Cameron and UAC, or Brandy Grace with UAC, they sent a joint letter that will be reviewed today in the Executive Appropriations Committee that was built off the principles that we've defined here. And so now as an organization, we do have an obligation to meet the principles that we built here and submitted to the state on how cities, towns, and counties will use these ARP funds.
Wayne, can I just add there that all morning we've been coordinating with the Executive Appropriations Committee chairs and legislative staff. So that will be, our letter will be presented at 4 o'clock today. It should be approved. And once it's approved, then those gas tax dollars will start flowing again. And then there'll be a discussion at interim committee tomorrow about the potential partnership between the state and local governments.
So what we have asked, and we asked in the last meeting, and we're going to ask for your approval today, is for every city and town to provide a portion of their ARP funds, so we can have somebody on staff that will provide the technical assistance, that will help you submit those reports, provide training, coordination, and then as well as data collection that we can then provide to the state, as well as media inquiries come in. We are prepared to defend those decisions. So in your packet, we have provided kind of a breakdown of the two options that we talked about at the last board meeting. And I'll switch over to that really in a minute. But option one is where we just take 0.1%. So that is the smallest amount of money someone would pay is $2.57, and the most amount of money that a city would pay is $85,000. That generates about $430,000. Option two is a flat fee. So the smallest amount a city or town would pay is $50, and the most amount that a municipality would pay is $20,000. And we as staff are recommending option two because what that does is there's no community that's paying a significant amount of money from their ARP funds. And what that allows, if a city or town opts not to pay, it doesn't necessarily impact our budget significantly if we have 10% of the communities dropping out. Number two, it does shift the burden a little bit more to the communities that will probably need assistance the most, but it won't be a significant shift. So I'll go ahead and switch over, and so we can look at the numbers here. So what you're looking at is the blue is the 0.1%. If everyone just paid 0.1% of their funding is the blue. The green is what they would pay each tranche. So you can see Schofield, their total allotment would be $2.50. They would pay $1.28 with each tranche that they are getting, since it comes in 2 rounds of funding. If you go to the flat fee, which is the pink, they will pay $50, and then the red is what they would pay each tranche. So it'd be $25 each tranche. And so we go from $50 to $250. So no one, and this is again is in your packet, so I'm going to scroll through this a little quicker. But what I want to point out is that anyone that is receiving less than $100,000 will not pay more than $250 to the league. And then it goes up, but the other one I will point out is when you get to about $800,000 is where you see the shift from you are actually going to be paying less as a community from the 0.1% than the flat fee. So everyone that is above $800,000 will be paying less than if we charge 0.1%. Now, I do recognize that everyone below that pays a higher percentage, but we are talking about smaller communities that will most likely need the most assistance from the league when it comes to figuring out how to spend the dollars, making sure that if they don't have qualified census tract communities, how to collect that data, and have justifications for how they spend that money. And then, of course, with the annual reporting. Then I'll just jump down to the very end. As you can see here, the largest amount, $20,000 in the flat fee versus $85,000 if it's the 0.1%. That, of course, generates quite a bit more money. We are targeting around $300,000 for this project with the recognition that not everyone is going to pay. And that is why the flat fee does provide us a little more. As you can see, if we have 10% of our 1,000 folks dropping out, it's not going to have the same impact as if we have some larger communities that are paying the 1%. So I'll leave it there and happy to answer any questions. But what we would be looking for from the board is a motion for either option 1 or option 2. Option 1 is the 0.1%, and the option 2 is the flat fee from $50 to $20,000. But happy to address any questions.
And then Mayor Caldwell, let me add one other point, is that if the board makes the motion to approve this plan of attack, then we would sit down with the leadership of the City Managers Association to finalize the details. We also don't have the exact amounts for most cities yet from ARP. That's still to come in the, Wayne, next 3 weeks?
They're anticipating this week. So what you see in the yellow are the numbers that the Treasury have announced. So we know that those cities that are in yellow that are receiving a direct allocation, these are the final numbers for those communities. Everyone else is still the estimate provided by CBO.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions, thoughts?
So Jeff Silverstream, Mr. Chair. First of all, Wayne, I just want to thank you and or the National League of Cities or whoever, our congressional delegation was involved as well to some extent, but I want to thank you for your efforts to get Mill Creek recognized as a metropolitan city. So we were kind of not on their radar yet because I guess we're too new still, but now we are. So.
Well, Mayor Silvestrini, I think when I joined the board of directors from an LC a couple of years ago, we were wondering about the time commitment and whether it'd pay off for the Utah League. I think this was a perfect example because they know who we are now, whereas in the past that wasn't necessarily the case. So Wayne and I were able to get to who we needed to find in order to get you on this list.
I can also say that I think that staff's recommendation about the second option is preferable just because it does increase the amount that some of the smaller communities are going to pay, and they're more likely to use this resource than some of the rest of us. And I still think it makes for a distribution that is not so too onerous for the cities that are contributing more. So.
Was that comment in the form of a motion, Mayor?
If there's, I'll make a motion to approve the ARP funding according to option 2 as recommended by the staff.
Really quick.
Sure.
How exactly do we document all of this for audit purposes? Because it will go back to the league, but once it gets to the league, we don't have any say over it. So, I mean, that's one that my finance director is going to wonder is how all of this is documented for our audit purposes that will come with this funding for both state and federal.
Just to clarify, Mayor Wilson-Edwards, so the money that you give to the league, how do we report back to you? How did we spend the $2,000 that you gave to the league with that employee? Just, is that correct?
Pretty much. We've got hit with the last audit following everything when they wanted to go after the state, and so needed a poster child of we followed the federal guidelines, but so the feds were trying to go after the state. We got hit following that. So our city is going to be super cautious with any funding and how it is spent and all of that to be able to report back with whatever audit we get hit with.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the question. So what we've been looking at in the interim is trying to have some type of portal or where a city can come in and they can put where they've spent their money and have a dashboard to see how, one, they're using their money that could potentially generate the report that you need for Treasury or for the state. And so you'd have a dashboard in which you as a city could use this. We could also create metrics for the employee that is hired. So we're going to track already the questions that were asked, the town halls and the trainings that we're going to be holding. And so we could once a year provide kind of a report card of what that employee has done, what they've accomplished, where their time is being spent. So you can have that and we can add that to your dashboard as well. So we certainly can make note of that and provide that moving forward.
And Mayor Wilson Edwards, I'll add one other option. This was an idea that a city manager shared with us when we were at the conference week. And they suggested that rather than having, let's say, Cameron City give $2,000 of ARP to the league, that instead Cameron City would do an equivalent of $2,000 from the general fund that would essentially be earmarked for that service on our end. That way, you wouldn't be tracking the ARP dollars to the league, it would be an equivalent from your general fund. So these are the types of details we want to sit down with UCMA and even finance, GFOA, and kind of get all these details hammered out. But we wanted to get the policy in place here, and then we could go to them and work out these details, because you're absolutely right. The last thing anybody wants is an inadvertent stumble that creates a complicated audit down the line. But I think it also speaks to why the technical assistance is so necessary, because we've had a lot of communities who have been reaching out to us asking, what do I do? How do I do this? And everybody has a concern somewhere on the concern spectrum on how to spend ARP dollars.
Great questions. Do we have any other questions we want to address or put before the board right now? Hearing none, there was a motion from Mayor Silverstream to accept number 2, staff's recommendation.
Dustin White, Roosevelt City, I'll second.
Okay, thank you. We have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Are there any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Cam, you want to continue?
Perfect. One thing I'll just note on the timing of this, we will be meeting with the UCMA leadership next week, and we'll know this week about the non-entitlement cities and how much money you'll be receiving from ARP. And then Wayne, can you just remind folks the timing of when those dollars will start flowing to the non-entitlement cities?
Yeah, so the state has 30 days to disperse that. So we're anticipating early June.
And so over the next few weeks, we'll finish putting together this program in consultation with UCMA. We'll be doing a town hall this coming Thursday at 10:30. We'll be taking questions. We'll have a representative from the governor's office of planning and budget to take questions on what the state is going to be doing on the tracking side. Mayor Caldwell, we have you as part of the agenda to talk about the process that's already underway in Ogden. And for most cities of a certain size, it seems that cities are already underway making their plans on ARP. So the goal is to do regular email blasts and town halls to help members know what they can and can't do with ARP dollars, recognizing that it could all change a little bit and will change over the next few weeks. So thank you for your support of putting this program together and this service together to help our members. Oh, Councilmember McKay just said she'd love to hear what other cities are planning to do with their money. And this is something, Councilmember, that we did during CARES Act, is we hosted several town halls that were really that exact topic. It was a roundtable discussion. South Jordan was doing X and West Jordan was doing Y and Riverton was doing Z, and helped people understand what they were doing with CARES Act dollars and also what they were doing with rec centers and other things to mitigate COVID. So that's part of the feedback we're looking for, is if it would be helpful for us to include that in our town hall programming that we'll be putting out over the next few weeks. I also anticipate that lots of these conversations will be happening at comms and cogs around the state as well. Any other questions or thoughts around ARP before we move on?
Cam, Jeff Silvestrini, I'm assuming that that the league will send out invoices for these amounts, and that I think that maybe a letter of explanation so that in case somebody missed what we're doing here, they get an explanation of it. That'd be good.
Yep, it will, and that's why we wanted to do it separate from the dues, is to make it clear that this was separate from ongoing money. It was a special project, and it'll have that explanation. So we will certainly have a letter that accompanies the invoice with the explanation.
This is Carrie Malkovich. I know you asked us for our point of contact for this money. Is that who you will be sending the information to? The person in our city that's kind of going to be, will be our financial director. And I just want to make sure that I'm not dropping the ball by telling him to wait for a letter.
So we have collected that information for GOPB, so they wanted one contact in every city to be able to, that is receiving money from the state, to be able to send information and coordinate with. It is our plan to use that same distribution for the notices that we send out and communication we send out, but I'll defer to Cam and Nick about who we will send a bill to.
Also, follow up with that then. Will the letter include information that if we are going to use the league resources, how much that will be and what that entails, so they'll know their contact on your end?
Correct. So yes, our correspondence will explain all of those communication details. Will articulate that this is essentially a voluntary assessment, but this is the service that we will be providing if everyone participates in this service. With regards to the outreach, that's something we'll coordinate if it makes sense to also, I think it makes sense to include as many people as possible. So city managers and clerks, the people we would normally correspond with about the dues, and making sure that they all get this information so people don't get crosswise within their cities if one person got something and somebody else doesn't know the context. So we'll finalize all those details now that you've given us the policy direction.
Thank you.
Perfect. All right. So far, so good. So thank you everyone for your support on the ARP piece. I'm going to turn it over to Victoria to update you on the city's work engagement effort and to lead the discussion on the Commission on Housing Affordability. We've got 27 minutes before the co-chairs are due to join us. Victoria.
Thanks, Cam. So we've put up here a slide that I think most of you have seen before, but this recaps a lot of the headlines that came out of session. And most of them are about housing. And really what the legislature was looking at during session and what the buzz was in the media. Cam did a lot of interviews during session on this. And since session, there have been even more headlines about housing and the crazy market that we are seeing in our state. And so I'm just going to briefly touch on our city's work campaign that we mentioned in the last board meeting. The idea behind city's work is to get more of our members to talk to their legislators and to help facilitate that. So we actually had a soft preview of this on training we did with the APA on Friday. Mayor Silvestrini was very gracious and joined our panel there. And what we're doing is we've put together a template that we think we'll be revealing soon. And we handed out last week. And the idea behind the template is to help cities tell their story. And it's not going to tell you how to, what to tell in your story or necessarily even what story to pick. But the idea is to give some examples so that you as city leaders can sit down and talk to your legislators. Now, a lot of you already have very active and effective relationships with your legislators, but we need more of our cities to do this. That personal relationship is really irreplaceable up on the Hill. So what we've called it is Cities Work Stories. We'll be sending the template out, and we've also created an engagement checklist, which is just a one-pager of this is what we are hoping you will do, whether it's inviting your legislators to spring and fall council meetings, to inviting them to a planning commission, and also holding them accountable when they are voting on or sponsoring bills that are detrimental to cities. So you can see this headline that Cam's put up. This is just recently in the Deseret News. And the message that we are hearing over and over, whether you agree with it or not, from legislators and here from the Gardner Policy Institute, is that zoning is our key, or some would say only problem when it comes to the housing market that we are experiencing in the state. And so the legislature and some of these think tanks continue to focus on land use. Cam, if you'd go to the next slide, or Wayne, I think. What we've heard from the legislature since session ended is that there are still frustrations with cities over planning for growth. So a fairly strong narrative that is coming out of the legislature is that to fix the housing crisis that we have, we need more housing units, and city zoning is limiting housing production. Just as a reminder, you were all very busy during 2020 despite COVID, and we had a record number of units permitted. And again, we had a record number of those being multifamily units. Some of the other solutions that are kind of all in this discussion coming out of the legislature is that we need more land use training for city officials. As a reminder, HB 409 passed during session, which mandates some annual training for planning commissioners. There's talk about having elected officials also take some of this land use training. There seems to be frustration with what we hear members of the Property Rights Coalition or the legislature identify as bad city actors. Right now, there is an Office of the Property Ombudsman that if there is disagreement about a land use decision, you can go to the Ombudsman for an opinion and also assistance sometimes in arbitration. Those opinions are non-binding. You can still go to court. But the Ombudsman, because our land use is going up exponentially, the Ombudsman is also very busy. And so there's been some mention of creating like a pre-Ombudsman process, an informal review, where a developer feels that a city is potentially acting outside of the law or as a bad actor, as it were. There's also been a lot of talk about municipal tax structure, and that the city's dependence on sales tax is a disincentive to zone for housing, that cities will look first to commercial because of that sales tax rather than to housing. There's a lot of elements to the municipal tax structure debate, but we are hearing a lot of rumblings from legislators to start looking at municipal revenue sources, and that comes within the context that they feel that cities sometimes will not look to housing because of some of these revenue sources. So leadership is asking for the league to bring solutions to the table. I'm sure you've all heard that there's sometimes grumbling up on the Hill that the league just says no to everything. I would disagree that that is not necessarily the case, but we are being asked to bring solutions to the housing problem to the table. Wayne, if you'd go to the next slide. And I'm sure you are all, because you're on the front lines, are familiar with the battles going on. This is just a list we put together of some battles happening just very recently. There's a decent handful of these that are coming from the residents in those cities. Some of this is also coming from the developers. But these are big, hard decisions, hard discussions that our cities are struggling with, whether it's rezone petitions or referendums, or just, you know, a general impression that a city is not acting in the best interests of those who need more affordable housing in their cities. If you'd go to the next. So we've put this table up at mid-year. We put it up there last meeting, but we've already had to add to it. These are the issues that we are expecting the legislature within the local government city realm to be looking at over the interim and potentially during session next year. And you can see on this list that we've added already some things that we didn't have on there before. Those submissions in red all go to this housing or this land use discussion, whether it's how a city uses its fees and a perception that a city is gouging developers or builders through its fee mechanism, to inclusionary zoning, or as I mentioned, the sales tax. And then those items that are green are additional items that we've added since then that we are hearing rumblings about, like municipal services. And notices are also on there. That will be a bill during the special session, but we need to continue to look at notice. So it's stacking up to be a busy year, and the bulk of these items are within this housing debate. Wait, if you go to the next.
Can you just speak really quickly to the inclusionary zoning specifically? You know, because we have that in Moab. So I'm just, what could you be a little more specific?
So last year, the Commission on Housing Affordability discussed and debated inclusionary zoning. A bill came out almost near the end of session. That was the commission bill. And it had inclusionary zoning language in it, but there was enough pushback and concern that it was too last minute, not baked enough, that the commission needed to go back to it. So those chairs have mentioned that they will continue to talk about inclusionary zoning this year. What they're ultimately trying to, what they're perceiving that policy looking like, we're not sure, but we're expecting the commission to talk about it again this year.
Okay, so no details on that policy. Okay.
And so the Gardner Policy Institute did a big report that many of you may have looked at. And these were the best practices that they identified in that December report. Number one, again, was zoning. Number two, preservation of affordable housing. Third was the RDA and tax increment. And then we had ADUs, which again, there was a bill on internal ADUs during session. And then the fifth one was TODs. So that's what Gardner is identifying that policymakers should tackle in order to help our housing crisis. Wait, if you go to the next. So where we are at now is that the Commission on Housing Affordability has had their first meeting during the same week as midyear. And then since they've had another meeting, and at that meeting, what they did is Senator Andrick and Representative Waldrop, the chairs who will be joining our discussion in about 20 minutes, they said, okay, we have direction from legislative leadership that we need to do something significant this year, that we are continuing to see this housing problem in our state. We need to do our very best as chairs to get all the stakeholders to the table and have some difficult conversations. So they have asked everyone, within this realm to submit their wish list to the commission. And my guess is that at the next commission meeting, which is next week, they will go through these various lists, and then per chair's prerogative, they'll probably pick some of the things for the commission to tackle this year. At the most recent meeting, the Property Rights Coalition submitted their wish list, and that is in your packet today. We'll put it up after this slide in just a second. What we need from all of you as the reps for your cities and board members of the league is our wish list. And the idea is not necessarily to go through the PRC list and debate that and say which ones we like and which ones we don't. The PRC, straight up in the meeting said, we know there are some third rail things on our list, but we also think there are some things that we can work with everybody on. We want to come up with our own independent list to take back to the commission today. And the idea being is once we have our wish list of what we think will help with this housing policy debate, then over the summer, then you start the horse trading. So we're not going to do that today, but we really need to hear from you. And we've put the list that staff initially put together in your packet, and we'll put that up. We need to hear what on that list is yes, what needs to come off that list, and what we missed on that list to take back to those chairs. And I do really believe that the commission chairs are doing a best effort to try and really move the needle and have everyone at the board in the discussion. Now, we all know that great ideas can happen during summer and then session, something goes completely left field. But I think the chairs are really trying to get a good bill together and have a lot of input. So we'll put that, I think we'll put that list up from the PRC so you can look at it briefly. And then we just want to have a discussion with you before the chairs get here about what you think needs to be on the ULCT list. So if you've got your PDF of the board packet, you can also list that. But this is the PRC list that they brought to the commission last time. You can see some of the items on there. It's rather lengthy, and then we can have a discussion about our list. Cam, did you have other thoughts?
Nope, I was just going to suggest Wayne to scan down to the draft list that we put together based on, in part, on the feedback we've heard from you as board members the last 2 meetings and from league members over the last few weeks since the end of the session. The other thing I'll add that was on that last slide is that we are proposing essentially what we're calling the Officers Plus. So like a coordinating committee, because we have the Commission on Housing Affordability, we have the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission that Mayor Ramsey will now serve on, and we have the Land Use Task Force, and we're trying to coordinate the discussions that impact city land use in all 3 of those entities and make sure that elected officials are helping drive that discussion. Normally we rely on the officers in between meetings or in between board meetings to provide that guidance. And so the thought was essentially Officers Plus. So it'd be the officers plus a cross section of others. That way we can still be small enough to be nimble, but have the input of the elected officials as we get further into the summer and we are debating the different wish lists. So I'll stop there, Victoria, and I'm curious to hear from the board on the 16 items that are now up on the screen, if there are things that should be added or things that shouldn't be on this list.
So Cam.
Yeah, let's hear from the members.
Go ahead, Emily, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. So I love this draft list. I feel very heard in just reading it because I definitely have been trying to say as loud as I can that there are a lot of cities and towns in rural Utah, I believe, that would be excited to have a 4-plex or a 6-plex somewhere right in their downtown, their emerging downtown area. And so it's not about zoning, it's about infrastructure. So I love number 1, but I want to say 2 things. Number 1 is regarding the broad term infrastructure. Infrastructure can be as little as sidewalks and as big as a sewer treatment plant. And so like when we think of Bluff, barriers to housing affordability in Bluff might be that it's very expensive for each home to install and manage its own septic tank. So that's it. That's like big picture infrastructure, all the way down to like in Moab, developers, struggle with infrastructure, costs that are like sidewalks and, other infrastructure like that. So smaller picture, but still infrastructure. So it might be good to just more clearly define housing related infrastructure, because it might be more that like for one city, one type of infrastructure description would be different than for another city. So city specific infrastructure needs. The other thing is that I don't know how many of you have been looking at the costs of construction. Just recently, but I was sitting with a builder friend of mine. OSB last year was like under 20 bucks a sheet, and now it's at 80 bucks a sheet, roughly. And so I think we're going to see a real spike in the cost of housing prices, construction prices. So we're going to see some private sector external factors that are going to discourage construction over the next year. I mean, it's already stopping projects. And so I think it's important for us to highlight that. Oh, and then one more thing while I'm talking, before I forget, in Governor Cox's One Utah plan, guess how many times housing is mentioned? 0. The word housing is mentioned 0 times in the One Utah plan. So I think that another recommendation that we could say is that we need housing to be prioritized by our governor, because there's talk around housing, but there's not a priority in his One Utah plan. But I'm hopeful that version 2 of the Utah plan will have housing.
Cam and Mike, Mayor.
Go ahead.
One data point that I would love to ask for is a bill that would require complete transparency of the actual cost of a new home. That when somebody buys their home, that the developer and the city are required to give them a total cost of their components of that home. So cost of construction, cost of land, profit margin for the developer, each city fee, any other fees that might be related. If we're going to ask, and we really want to know what the cost of housing is, well, let's put it in a bill and let's require 100% transparency. I would love a new homeowner to see what percentage of their home is actually fees and how much of it is cost of construction, land, and developer profit. That's item 1. And I think the second one, and I don't know if it goes on this list, but it's in your staff report, is some recognition of the policy of, does new development pay for itself, or are we putting that burden onto future residents by requiring the taxpayers to subsidize the cost of new development? Because that's what the development community really wants. That's how they're proposing to reduce the cost of housing, is to have it be borne by lower fees or taxes. And I appreciated that in the staff report. That's a huge crux of this conversation. And the governor talked about it at the session. He talked about this is the first generation. He wasn't talking about housing. He was talking about the recovery funds and how we are asking future generations to pay for our current living right now. And we're risking the same thing by going down this path.
Great point. Jeff, go ahead.
So I was going to say, I support what's been said before by Mayor Niehaus and Gary. And a lot of these things that are more concrete, and I realize we need to get to concrete things we can say yes to, but there's a message in here that I think that we also need to make sure it gets heard, which is, what we're trying to do actually is to plan for future growth too. And there's a lot more pieces to this than what it costs to build a building and acquire the land. We have to plan for the infrastructure. We have to make sure that there's adequate water and sewer and power and gas for all these developments, and get those things accomplished through our rights of way and all that. So there is a reason that we plan for development. And the other thing that is going on here too is we've collaborated for growth plans like Wasatch Choice that recommend that we put more density in centers so that it can be served by transit. If we upzone the whole state like what they're talking about here, or if inclusionary zoning means haphazard multifamily stuff in places where there isn't infrastructure for it, or that'll never be served by transit, we're not going to be doing a good job of making our communities livable. So I think a predicate to a lot of these things is to explain that, I mean, our goal in planning is legitimate. Our goal in planning is consistent with what I think everybody in the state supports about trying to leverage our transit assets and make it so that if people live in a more dense situation, they can use transit in a metropolitan area, as opposed to being spread out and having that, last mile or last 2 mile problem. So I'd like to see some kind of an articulation of that, because that's a theme for a lot of these other things that we're talking about.
I wanted to ask to Gary. Gary, help me understand how the itemization of true housing costs. My worry is that it would set the legislature up to pit city against city and say, look at their fees compared to their fees. And it may be absent the context of the decisions cities make about whether or not they're going to collect impact fees or what their own utility ownership is. And, just do you think that itemization might be a vulnerability more than an asset at the legislative level?
It's a good question, and there is some risk there. And I haven't thought through this completely, Mayor. But one is we already have to show that we already have that information, and if the developer wants to, they can collect it all from each of us now and show that. What's not available is the cost of land, the cost of construction, and developer profit. My thinking, my hope is that right now we're getting villainized that so much of this cost is our fault. Well, if they see that the percentage is more like 7 or 8% of the total cost of a house is fees, and that ties directly to what Mayor Silvestrini is talking about, which is the infrastructure that goes to support the home, that we can demystify the boogeyman here, that it's not us. That's the theory. I don't know if it would work.
I appreciate that theory. I'll just make a quick comment aside from that as we are, and we're doing it too, wanting to concentrate affordability around transit modes. And I see that under line 9. Or I hope that we can also find ways as a state to look at the local level at the geographic inequities that are created by a concentration of affordability in certain areas and a lack of affordable access in every other part of the area. And there is a balancing there, recognizing that our residents pay 20% of their household income towards transportation costs. And that's way too much when you're already paying more than 30% of your income for your housing costs, and half of our residents are housing unstable. I know that the affordability of transit access and proximity to job centers is absolutely critical, but I'm just throwing out there that I'd love to see some focus on deconcentrating where affordable housing happens, and a spectrum of housing types that are affordable, from single room occupancy or accessory dwelling units up to 3-bedroom family sized duplex, row house, single family housing in different parts of the state. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, may I weigh in?
Please.
A couple of thoughts. The first one is, I don't know where this would really fit into a category, but I do think we need to do a better job of tightening our definitions of affordable housing. There are actual definitions for that. And when you hear from our legislators, they use that interchangeably with housing. And you often hear from them that volume will bring pricing down. And I think we have several different issues here, but when we're talking about affordable housing, we should separate that. And we should make sure we're all using the same terms and encourage that among our legislators in these discussions. The other thought is it seems like this is much bigger than just Utah. It's a national movement. I received something recently from one of our larger developers in town, and he was pinging me with a new study that just came out from the National Home Builders. And it was a fee analysis that I think it cost $93,000 per home to build because of regulatory constraints and impact fees. And they glommed it all together, and it's quite, the stuff that's in there is stuff like the cost of loss of land due to setbacks or the cost to meet OSHA guidelines. And I mean, they put any imaginable thing in there. So I think, to Gary's point, an itemization of the costs and maybe a little bit of pushback from us in the fact that it's pretty well established news that building materials have gone up 300% in the last year. That's something that's going to far outpace any impact fees or regulatory costs. And I think we need to fight back, because they're going to do everything they can to pin that on us. And then the last item that's not on here, and everybody will groan, but it came up pretty strongly at our Resort and Gateway Community Caucus, is I think there is a desire to revisit the idea of a real estate transfer tax in a very narrow capacity. A lot of our communities have second homes that are quite expensive. And those second homes, we would like the opportunity to put a real estate transfer tax on to help pay for the workforce in support of those homes. And I know it's controversial, but I think if there was a way to do that targeted, maybe even using just I think there's 11 or 12 resort communities as a place to start. I mean, some sort of tax that maybe goes towards second homes or homes over, X number of dollars, that then goes directly into a housing authority, which can help provide housing for the workers that support those homes, would be something I think we'd like to explore.
Mayor Caldwell, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, please do. Good comments.
So we did reference the real estate transfer tax as a potential tool. What we were thinking about it is for state funding. What I'm hearing you say, Mayor Bierman, is that maybe within this category of dedicated money for affordable housing, having a local dedicated revenue stream for affordable housing. So it doesn't necessarily need to all go to Olene Walker. It could be a tool for cities in certain circumstances.
One way I think we could manage it, I mean, I'm open to looking at a state fund if there's a broad desire on this, but I'm also it could be a very targeted tool where it's voter approved in a community. That's how the resort taxes are. Our voters have to vote to tax themselves, and then that money goes back into the community, which means anybody that's not interested is not bound by it. At least community-wise, if you're a member that votes against it and you're against the majority, you're in, but statewide, you'll have a choice, community by community.
I would like, this is Mary Niehaus, just to fully support what you're saying, Andy, for sure. And even resort community or not, if the taxpayers say yes to a RETA, that could be awesome. I will say that over the past 20 years, I've heard you can't do it in Utah because we're a non-disclosure state. And I just want it because that's what I think I continue to hear that argument. So I think we just need to have a real specific reason why that is not, that's, not a reason not to do a real estate transfer assessment. Just because we're a non-disclosure state does not mean we cannot assess and collect and distribute a real estate transfer tax. I just wanted to put that out there because I just feel like every time I hear that, somebody in the room shuts it down with it's illegal. And none of us want to feel like we're advocating for something illegal.
It is not illegal.
We should have a shared message around how it's not illegal, is what I'm saying. If it's gonna be one of our draft topics.
This is Len Harvey. So I'm just curious about the real estate transfer tax. And I do own vacation properties. So I already feel like I'm taxed higher anyway, because I don't get the residential deduction. But increasing the price of a transaction, doesn't that increase the price of housing? Because it's going to be baked into the sales price. But anyway, that's just, it just seems like that probably wouldn't help a lot. Maybe it helps with somebody's fees, but I don't know, it helps with the price of housing.
May I speak to that, Mayor Harvey?
Sure.
That's, the state already has a provision for primary residents getting a discount on their property taxes. And I think since we're talking about housing affordability for our residents, if this only impacted second homes and commercial properties, then it wouldn't impact that affordability issue we're trying to address.
Mayor Caldwell, this has been a great discussion, but I'm pleased to announce that Representative Waldrop has joined us, and I'm looking for Senator Andrigg. So as soon as I see Senator Andrigg return, I'll let you know. But Representative Waldrop, welcome. Thank you for joining us after your caucus meeting. And we've been spending the last 40 minutes or so walking through here comes Senator Andrigg. So Senator Andrigg and Representative Waldrop, welcome to both of you. We spent the last 40 minutes or so brainstorming the potential wish list of items to bring to the Commission on Housing Affordability in the upcoming days. But we wanted to give the two of you a chance to address the league board. You have mayors and council members from St. George to Richmond, from Moab to Salt Lake, and I won't say all the others so that you can speak, but we're excited to have you. And Senator, Representative, we'll turn it over to you, and the group is ready with some questions too after you guys give your brief overview.
Thank you very much. Steve, do you want to go first? Or maybe not.
Oh, why don't you lead out, Jake?
You're good. Thanks, Steve. Thank you very much, Cameron and members of the board. We really appreciate this opportunity. I'm in my 9th year in the legislature, and it's an interesting prospect to kind of, say I'm a conservative, say that we believe in local control, and, whatever decisions are being made at the local level are the best decisions, and so on and so forth. And yet on the same account, we tend to have this natural tendency that there's this fight, this balance that occurs between, land use authority at the local level and the needs and or wants and responses at the state level. And what's difficult for us is to see reports like, the growth in Utah, housing affordability, water issues, landscaping, size of lots, density, transportation. And oftentimes it's frustrating because we feel like there's this constant, hey, we don't have enough, we need more, we need more, we need more. And yet on the same account, when the state does come and say, hey, like we did with Senate Bill 34, we need you to do this, and we kind of push back on you a little bit, there's this outcry. Truth is, I think you guys did a fantastic job with implementation on SB 34, and the slow adopters, if you will, they got there. It maybe took them a little bit longer, but they got there, and that was very encouraging. What was interesting about that whole prospect on SB 34 was publicly, all of the city council members, mayors, city managers who would have to go, oh, we can't stand the legislature, those idiots, psh, 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 we're going to hit them upside the head. And then privately, I'd have these conversations where they would put their hand and they'd go, hey, thank you so much for doing that. We understand NIMBYism, but we couldn't do it because there was so much political backlash. I know not all cities felt that way. I know not all individuals that serve in their respective positions feel that way. But every once in a while, if we can work together behind the scenes, we can help accomplish what is absolutely the best deal for the policy and the growth and the impacts on density and all that stuff, when it is politically impossible or very difficult to do. And I don't mind taking the slings and arrows. I have a big enough area. Representative Waldrop may feel a little bit differently because he's got a little bit more,
Even less than Jake does.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't mind doing it. What I don't like is the scenario where we have to constantly go to battle. I know it feels like the legislature is constantly just like pointing the finger of blame and constantly saying you guys aren't doing enough and blah, 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 blah. I get it. I totally get it. But I also think that we are facing a reality today that we haven't faced to this level before. And I'd like to have a frank conversation. And with your permission, Steve, I'm just going to lay some of our cards on the table. Representative Waldrop and I both received pretty direct marching orders from House and Senate leadership that now's the time for us to really look at zoning, inclusionary zoning, permits, impact fees, and there's a whole host of things that the Property Rights Coalition has put together. I'm going to just be honest with you. I get it. The speaker's a developer in the House. The whip, the majority whip in the House is a developer. The president of the Senate is a developer. So they all have vested interest on a personal level, and that's great. And they're the ones that gave us the marching orders. However, you guys are a force to be reckoned with. And if we throw out a policy that is declaring war on the league, you guys will put into action your emails and your phone calls, and we'll start getting, every one of my colleagues will start getting phone calls from their city council members and from their mayors, people of influence in their respective areas, right? And what happens is then we start losing up here. Our colleagues in our caucus start falling off. And even though we've got people up here pounding their chest on land use authority and stuff like that, the ones holding the bag who have to carry this dead chicken around the state for however long we're going to run this bill, because that's what I call it, a dead bill, is a dead chicken. We're carrying it around. Steve and I are the ones that are going to have to do that, because once the caucus bails on us, House and Senate leadership stop having less bravado, and Steve and I are the ones that take this on politically. So Steve and I are trying to balance, and part of the reason I asked Cam if we could come and meet with the board is because, quite frankly, Steve and I both understand very clearly that what we're being asked to do is going to be a very difficult lift. So I didn't want to be the guy running around taking all the slings and arrows if I ultimately wasn't going to be able to get anything accomplished. So we have a big fight that ultimately doesn't resolve into much of anything policy-wise. So Steve and I started talking and saying, okay, what could we do? Could we present what the House and Senate leadership want, what the Property Rights Coalition want, and for the first time really say we got to really push the needle on some of these things. And some of you are not going to like that. I totally understand that. But on the same account, what are the biggest issues, the biggest needs, the biggest problems that the league is facing? Funding for B&C roads, truth in taxation. There's probably a whole lot more. So part of what we wanted to talk to you guys about today is what other aspects of things that are you guys dealing with? I know money is a big issue in multiple facets. If we're going to go after your permits, if we're going to go after your impact fees and whatnot, we have to have a way of replacing those. So my thought is, and Representative Waldrop and I have talked about this several times, if we're really going to open up a bill file through the Utah Housing Affordability Commission that is going to really address some of these big concerns, and I'll just kind of tell you, the word that came back to me was, why in the heck do we have a housing affordability commission if we're not going to actually address the things that will help us alleviate the affordable housing? In fact, if you guys don't look at this, there's no point in having a commission. We should just disband it. That's the word I got back. Well, okay, so that then is like gearing us up to throw a punch at the league. Well, okay, but that doesn't work. So I wanted to come here, and Representative Waldrop, you can speak for yourself, but I wanted to come here and I wanted to say, what if we tie together what they're saying in the Property Rights Coalition with possible changes that are workable, even though they might be really crappy to some of you, with addressing some of the needs that you guys have, like B&C road funds, like perhaps authorizing a tax increment at the local level to cover B&C roads, something of that nature. I just want to see, if we're going to have this big old brouhaha this year that we're being told from House and Senate leadership we need to push through this commission, how do we get to the table and not it be just we're entrenched, you're entrenched, we're going to fight, but rather here's where we're coming from, what are your needs, and then let's tie these two together and see if we can't actually alleviate as much of the problem as we might create in what's being proposed. That's my 2 cents. I'm happy to answer any questions from my standpoint. What about you, Steve?
No, I agree with everything you said. I think I don't think there's anybody in this group that isn't aware of the housing situation in the state of Utah, be it Wasatch Front, Wasatch Back, rural. It's everywhere, and it's impacting our citizens. It's impacting our families. It's impacting our young people, and it will have a significant detrimental impact on our economy writ large if we don't figure it out. And part of that figuring it out is obviously market volume. You know, how many units are coming on the market? What's the demand? And how do we try and meet that demand in a responsible way? And there's no better organization to address that than the league. You know, this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where decisions are made. And so I think from my standpoint, and Victoria and I worked on a difficult issue last year. We created a working group and spent a lot of hours herding a lot of cats, but we came out with the right policy. And so, at least to me, if we focus on coming up with the correct policy and less worried about you know, who scores what political points, if we focus on the policy solution that makes sense, that everybody can agree on the fact that this is the right policy, then we can deal with the pieces of that need to be addressed. And some of the things that Jake just talked about with addressing some of the other issues that cities have. I mean, I think this works so much better as a collaborative group trying to find a solution to a real and present problem that is throughout the state. There's no place that I'm aware of that hasn't been touched by this housing crisis right now. So that's my thought. I mean, I don't bring any baggage of you know, past dealings between the league and the legislature. I know there have been, you know, knockdown, drag out fights in the past. You know, as Victoria can attest, my approach is a lot more collaborative, and Jake's saying the same thing. I mean, we want to work together to solve the problem. And there are a lot of things that we can consider, but if we get together and say, okay, here are the top 3, the top 5 things that we can do to address the housing crisis, and here are the top 3 or top 5 things that we can do to address issues that the league has with respect to things related to housing or unrelated to housing. Is it the sales tax distribution formula? Is it, you know, you name it. We're looking for the league to come back in a meaningful way with ways to address this. It just doesn't work if we're trying to ram something down your throat, you're trying to ram something down our throat, nothing will get done, and the citizens of our state will suffer as a result. So this is the body, this is the group that needs to engage in this in a really meaningful way with the legislature, and we got to find some solutions. We got to find the right policies that will address these solutions. And I have every bit of confidence that we can do that together.
So this is Jeff Silvestrini, Senator and Representative. Thanks for coming here. I think that what we're doing right now is the solution to the problem that we have, which is talking more. And frankly, I think it would actually be beneficial to get in the same room with some of the you know, development interests on this, because the risk that we have on both sides of this is legislation by anecdote. And you know, there are anecdotes on both sides of this stuff. You know, we recognize that we have a housing, you know, crisis, a housing shortage, and most of us are doing things to try to remedy that. I mean, are there other things we could do? Yeah, we should talk about that. But we also have to, I think, remember that our principal role really is planning and making sure that if something gets built, there's infrastructure to serve it, right? I mean, we're left holding the bag with delivering the infrastructure on you know, roadways accommodating traffic, you know, and you know, sewer capacity, water capacity, those kinds of things, and And really what we've kind of been talking about, you know, one of the things that's been mentioned is how are we going to pay for this growth? Is this growth going to be, you know, funded by the existing taxpayers of a municipality that, or is there a mechanism to charge some of the new growth for some of that cost? You know, that's the impact fee discussion, and maybe we don't have the right approach there, but until we figure out another way to pay for some of these things, we just can't grow without a plan. That's the Wasatch Choice, you know, message. And so anyway, the start of this is talking about it and getting everybody in the room, I think. And you know, I think we're prepared to talk about some of these things that you've asked us about and be partners. We don't like the fact that we always say no, right? We're trying to find ways to say yes. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. If I may quickly respond, I think you're right, is that we need a plan. However, let's be very clear here. In absence of a plan, the growth is still going to come. So let's do it right. I think you guys to a large extent have, but I just want to say that we have to, I think, have an improved plan. So
we can't have a plan for no growth.
Yeah.
I won't accept that. And you know, and a lot of our residents, that's a lot of our residents come and say, we don't like this growth. We hate it, right? And it doesn't matter if we hate it. You know, we
have met my wife, Jeff. Is that you're telling me that? No, and I think the legislature is going to take a big step tomorrow, a leap of good faith that we're going to try and begin to fund some of those infrastructure issues, you know, by grant, by allowing municipalities an opportunity to pursue grants to offset some of those costs. But I think we can do more. And I think, Jeff, you're exactly right. I think you hit it on the head. If we aren't talking, we're guessing at what your needs are. You're guessing at what our needs are. We're both guessing at the developer side needs. We need to understand what everybody's needs are and then work toward a solution.
Emily, you have your hand up.
I just wanted to say, Senator, that you said you're carrying around dead chicken. I love fried chicken. So we just need to bring the oil to the table and we need to cook something up together. And I'm excited about this conversation. And, you know, we got to look forward and really communicate better. And I just want to plug development in rural or emerging cities and towns, infrastructure dollars. When we talk about development, I think we just think about development along the Wasatch Front or in our, you know, already densely populated cities. So if we can spread the resource into our smaller or emerging communities that want to grow, then and really lack the ability to do so because it's expensive. Sewer plants are expensive. I know because we're paying one off right now and we're biting our nails about it. So if we can do, you know, if we can do better as mayors and council members to share our needs, our infrastructure needs, you know, and we can get resource and support from that in that way. That would definitely go a long way, I think, in creating not just affordable housing, but housing affordability.
I would agree. I thought Moab had all the land and resources it needed, though.
Oh yeah, we're good, actually. Totally good.
I talked. Hey, can I just quickly also throw in a plug here? And he's not paying me to say this, but I am going to say Cameron Deal and his team are fantastic. Like, I don't know just how much you guys realize how much they do up here. And they're always trying to figure out how to get the right policy. They just, Cameron's been a delight to work with. I'll just say that. We don't always agree. He and I butt heads a lot, but ultimately we get to a good spot. And it's a tribute to his team and who he's got. So you guys really should be thankful for who you got there. You can pay me later, Cameron.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, this is Len Harvey. So I think as I drive around, there's a lot of construction going on. And I think one of the things that everybody needs to understand is that we're already at capacity. I don't know if anybody's tried to build anything lately, but you can't get lumber, you can't get concrete, you can't get labor. And so the fact that we have certain constraints in itself leads to increasing prices, which we're seeing. The other thing is that it is tremendously expensive when you make zoning mistakes. And just to open doors and let development happen wherever it wants, in the long run, very expensive, and destroying the quality of life for our residents isn't a great idea.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. You used to be the mayor. Are you still the mayor of North Salt Lake?
I still am for a little while, yeah.
Okay, good. I remember talking to you when I worked in Mike Lee's office several times. I just wasn't sure if you were still in that role or not, but
I am.
you're
For a
absolutely
while.
right. It's a major pain. And I think this is something that we have to continue to push back a little bit on, that the cities play a role, but they're not the cause of the issue, but they play a role. There are many, many, many other causes and or roles that are played here, and we have to keep that balance. And it's a difficult thing. No matter what we do, we may still find ourselves a little bit behind the 8 ball, but I really appreciate your comment there, because I think it shows really good foresight.
This is Mayor Niehaus. Can I make another quick comment? I think it's important, Senator, that we also recognize the work that the cities have done even in the past couple of years. So I do know that all my friends, all my besties across all the cities and towns in Utah have really looked hard. And so it's almost time to shift from that, where cities, have a role to play, to cities are playing their role. Cities are actively, playing a role in the development of housing affordability. And so it would feel nice to start hearing that more, because I know, like I said, my friends that are running the cities and towns in Utah are working really hard.
Nicholson, I think you are up next, and then Gary Hill. Oh, you might be muted.
Mayor Castleton, we cannot hear you. So let's go to Gary while Mayor Castleton works on his technology in Eureka.
Perfect. Go ahead, Gary.
So I'm the city manager of Bountiful, representative and senator. We've talked before, and we really appreciate you being here. One of the issues that Mayor Silvestrini started to talk about relates very directly to Representative Waldrop, to what you mentioned, which is the policy issues. And I think a very primary policy issue is who pays for new growth. By new growth, I'm talking about the infrastructure that goes to support new growth, right? The roads, the sewers, the neighborhoods, everything else. And it has been a policy of cities for many, many years that new development should pay for that cost, as opposed to having existing taxpayers subsidize the cost of new development. And so I would like to know if that conversation is being had at the committee level, because that's where a lot of the rub comes between the development community and the cities. Is the development community believes that the cost of new development ought to be subsidized by government. We believe that it should not. So two-part question. One is that conversation being had, and is there any consensus on it? And two, if taxpayers are going to be asked to bear the cost of new development, then we are going to need new revenue sources to offset the cost of that. Senator, any thoughts there?
Absolutely. I don't know how many of you were paying attention to some of the language we had included in last year's bill that ultimately was taken out. But there was actually an accounting provision that we pulled out of the bill that was going to basically validate what you just said, which is, are the costs, because the statute said these should be offsetting, basically pass-through costs of whatever XYZ infrastructure is, okay? There's much disagreement within the development community that we are actually seeing pass-through costs. We are seeing there is this discussion, and it's really hard to verify because every city does it a little bit differently. But it's really hard to verify that cities are passing through these costs and not trying to make revenue that is not necessarily directly linked to the cost of providing a service. Some cities do a better job at transparency in this than others. So I don't want to lump everybody together here, but the problem is there's not a very good accounting system to allow the average citizen to walk in and to verify the costs associated with putting in the capital improvements for the infrastructure, sewer, water, whatever, are directly offset with costs. Now, that's also a double-edged sword because you guys have increasing costs on concrete, on piping, on gravel, on, you name it. And as the housing market blows up, then all of a sudden you have increased costs that you weren't necessarily planning for. So there is some sort of fungible aspect to what the cost pass through is. But one of the things that was pulled out of last year's bill was a requirement for direct accounting, city by city, to verify what costs were being passed through, or if any city was using it as an opportunity to generate revenue that wasn't directly linked to the services provided. Yes, that discussion is being had and is still being had. And I would just say, I believe there are many cities, most cities are doing it the right way and complying with the intent of the law. But we have seen several examples of cities that are using this as a revenue generating component. Once again, I don't know how accurate that assessment is because I don't know how accurate the pass-through costs are being accounted for. But that's certainly a discussion that's being had. But your point is not lost, even in that discussion. How do we appropriately pass the costs of new development on to the rest of the city? I don't think that is necessarily, we haven't done that way for many, many, many decades. So let's figure out, is that still the right policy to move forward? And if it is, how do we pay for it in an effective way? And if it's not, what are the alternatives? And I think it's time for us to have a serious discussion as to how, and I'm a broaden the base, lower the rate type of thing. And I think we're getting to a cost point that if we don't broaden the base and lower the rate, our citizens might not like that. And so you might need some political cover from the legislature, but it will certainly help it to be much more affordable.
And Gary, even you go to that base policy that Jake was just talking about of what is the right policy? Where should that cost be borne? How broad is that reach? Everything we are doing right now, and I would say everything, but most of what we're doing right now is very city-centric and locally determined. You could have a development on the edge of a city that has this massive impact across the street, and they're getting the benefit and none of the burden. So I think that's one of the large policy discussions we ought to have is, where does that burden appropriately fall? And I think we're wide open to discussion about how to approach those kind of things where it's easier to deal with on a localized basis, but that may not be the right approach. That may not be the appropriate approach for some of those costs. And I think we have to be willing to look at those things. And from the city standpoint, we want to hear what your guys' thoughts are on that and what your ideas are, because you'll know better than we do.
Can I speak to that?
Please do. We have about 5 minutes, so we got to go hot and fast so we can let these guys off when we agreed to let them go.
Well, I'll make a quick suggestion. Park City just put itself through the exercise of hiring Zion Bank to come in and do a impact fee assessment. And I have to say it was well worth it. We found that some of our fees were too high and some of our fees were too low, but ultimately it put a direct formula to what we were doing. And as you look at the suite of tools and carrots and sticks as you put this bill together, certainly some help from the state that all of our cities and towns could go through those kind of assessments would would put this debate to bed and help add some fairness to the process. So I'd hope you'd consider some matching funding or some incentives to help more cities and towns do it.
Andy, keep your pencil out and write it down and add it to the list. I mean, that's the kind of thing that we need to understand.
Carrie, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Senator Andrick. Thank you for, and Representative Waldrop, thank you for taking our suggestions here today. I think one of the things that I'm representing a small city, we forget that there's a lot of trickle down to this that happens. We're now to the point where truth in taxation isn't a once in a while activity. It's yearly now. Just maintaining status quo. We have to increase at least a few percentages, and so to add this kind of dialogue to our citizens and to say, okay, there's some state mandated requirements now that we need to do. We get a lot of pushback because of we don't want increase of commercial development, or we don't want high density because that's going to increase law enforcement issues. And of course, there's the same thing that everybody else has been talking about with infrastructure costs. The costs just up for some reason, even though we've tried our campaigns to say we're spending it wisely, or whatever. They think that all their property taxes go to the cities, and they don't recognize that a lot of it goes to the school districts. So my question is there a way that we can maybe take some of that education funding out of property taxes so that cities can adequately fund themselves? And then also, is there something in the state level to maybe address the communication or PR approach to the growth that's coming? A lot of people with COVID think it's just all the California people, but it's really an internal growth as well, probably more so with the governors of the past of economic development being the number one priority. It has led to our children being able to have jobs here, which we appreciate. But so long story short, is there a way that we can change the formula for property tax as well as a campaign to show overall growth of our state and the need for housing?
If I may, I'll quickly address all three of those aspects. Yes, yes, and yes. Unlikely, unlikely, and probably. What I mean by that is Senator Howard Stevenson's crowning jewel of a bill up here was truth in taxation, being the guy at the Taxpayers Association. It's now become the darling bill, template bill within ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, but which, by the way, President Adams is the president of ALEC this year. So I'm putting it on the table. So this is the diabolical aspect going on in my mind, right? They want us to throw a punch on land use authority. I'm like, okay, then let's put truth and taxation on the table. Boom. They're not going to want to do it. And I'm going to say, well, you can't have it both ways, President, right? So I do think we need to have some sort of inflationary component in truth and taxation so that you guys aren't going to battle and the people with their torches and pitchforks every time you suggest you're going to have to increase the rate. I get it. I don't know any other way. The second question is there a way on property taxes? Sure, yeah, but 20% on average statewide. Park City is a little different, but 20% on average statewide of local property taxes is what is actually taken in at a local school district level. 80% comes from the state or the feds, okay? But 70% of the local property tax, at least in Alpine School District, and that varies a little bit throughout the state, but about 70% of the local property tax is going to the schools. So if we open that up, is it possible? Sure, it's possible. But then you're having a major fight with the League of Seasoned Towns, with the school districts, and with the educational institutions. And I'd love to see that fight, but I just don't think it will result in policy adjustments at all. But your point is well taken. Those are all things I want to throw at the table, which is why, quite literally, if I've got a gun pointed to my head over here and you guys want to point a gun this way, I'm going to duck, right? And let the bullets fly, because truth is, I think that's the only way that we can get policy that is substantive over here with policy that's substantive over here. So I want to tie these two together. I want to actually force them to actually get to the table. So it's not just a one side gets everything they want, because good policy up here is oftentimes not everybody gets everything they want, but everyone gets a little something they need. So if we can help relieve some of your burden while at the same time addressing some of the zoning issues, the NIMBYism issues that are happening across the state, that would be very beneficial.
Yeah.
Senator and Representative, I'll just jump in. I know it's 2 o'clock and we need to get off. We really appreciate your willingness to listen. And I think we all understand that if you make everybody in the room mad, you've probably found the right balance for policy. And that's just the world that we live in. We, again, appreciate your willingness to listen, to come be a participant in this. We all have things that we hope to talk about well down the road. This is something we as the league deal with on a daily, weekly basis. And it's something that the state needs to be very heads up about. I always get teased for saying this, but I kind of believe the quote, and that the great one always said, greatness isn't skating to where the puck is, it's skating to where the puck is going to be. And Wayne Gretzky's one of my heroes. But if we can talk about this, we can all figure out some common ground and try to understand where it's going to be. Nobody understood that we were going to see a 300% increase in material rates and what's happened in the last couple of years here. I don't think anybody could have predicted that, but this kind of dialogue really does help us figure that out and gives us a workable platform to address these things and to take care of our residents and everything else. We really appreciate the willingness to come participate, give us your thoughts and ideas. We give you the same promise that we'll push those back to you, and we'll have open and productive dialogue as we move forward. Does anybody else have anything else before we thank our legislators for joining us today and move to adjourn?
Mayor
Caldwell, we cannot move to adjourn yet. You still have one more action item. So hang in there. But any other comments, legislators?
Cameron, have you talked about the new fund that we're setting up tomorrow? Is that cat already out of the bag?
Nope, we did not get a chance to go into that in detail. We've talked previously about the fund from last session, and we put ARP dollars on our wish list, but go ahead.
We're going to put, and I think this is just a sign of where the legislature is on these issues. Tomorrow, we're going to create a fund that'll be administered by GoEd for cities to come in and make grant requests for infrastructure. We're going to put $35 million into it tomorrow. We're hopeful that fund will grow and be a great tool. We're kind of interested to see if this is a great tool that addresses some of those issues that the cities have talked about. And so GoEd's going to be creating a program around that fund. And so we need your input as we work with GoEd to create that program so that it goes where you guys need it to go and not where we think we need you to put it, if that makes sense. So we're looking forward to working with your group on defining what the parameters of that program are, and then what the need is and the impact, and we can continue to fund it. It's a great use for one-time money, and we got one-time money in spades right now. So we really appreciate everything you guys have done, and nothing's easy, right? This will be fun because it's not easy.
Thanks, everyone. I got to jump off.
Thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to visit with us. We do look forward to working together. Thank you.
So Mayor Caldwell, I realize we're after 2 o'clock, but here's the final two asks we have of the board. Ask number one, Wayne or Nick, can you bring back up that draft list? Ask number one is essentially a tentative approval of that list, recognizing that we as staff have been taking notes, and there were several ideas that came up that we'll add to this draft list, but using this draft list as the starting point to be able to take back to the CHA. The next CHA meeting is a week from Wednesday, correct, Victoria? So it's a week from Wednesday. So what we propose is to take the draft list modified with the feedback we've heard from you today, and then even give you through the rest of the day to shoot us texts or emails. If there's anything else that kind of comes from this conversation, then we will take this draft list and circulate it with our land use task force home team and with the LPC this week to get additional feedback. So then we can present this list at LPC next Monday and say, this is the list we're going to take to the Commission on Housing Affordability to start the dialogue this summer. So that's the first request, is just preliminary approval of this list to build on. Mayor Caldwell, my second ask is that I referenced the possibility of a coordinating committee, which would be officers plus. I rely, and league staff relies heavily on the league officers throughout the year. Knowing the scope of the dialogue out there on the housing and population growth space, and trying to coordinate our reps on the Commission on Housing Affordability, the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission, and the Land Use Task Force, we've contemplated putting together this officers plus coordinating group that would have elected officials, a couple of attorneys, a planner, someone with economic development expertise. That can be a more nimble group than the LPC, but that can help provide feedback to league staff and those league appointees as the conversation gets going under the umbrella policy guidance of the league board. We've not yet finalized who would be on there, but if you are comfortable with that structure, we can work with the officers in the next few days to finalize that approach. So Mayor Caldwell, looking for final direction on the preliminary list and that coordinating committee concept, officers plus.
Okay, we'll open that up. Does anybody have any comments, or do they want to make a motion about the initial list of 16 priorities?
Andy Bierman, I'll make a motion in support of it.
Thanks, Andy.
I'll second that. This is Emily, Mayor Niehaus.
Okay, is this just for the initial list of 16 or for both recommendations from staff, Andy, just to clarify?
Both recommendations.
Okay, Emily, is that okay with you too?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, we
With
have
an exclamation point behind the draft.
Okay, we have a first and a second to recommend those staff recommendations. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, hearing none. Cam, you got some marching orders. Thank you very much. With that, is there anything else that you need us to cover before we adjourn?
If you have any other thoughts on this draft housing piece or any other thoughts in the housing space, now is the time. Email us, text us. We'll have the final list ready for LPC on Monday and to submit to the CHA chairs next week. If you have thoughts about the annual convention, let us know as we start planning there. And otherwise, we are planning to meet in person, or at least a hybrid meeting in June. So look forward to seeing people then and there. But thank you for your feedback today. This has been a very informative and productive meeting. As you can see, those two co-chairs we've worked with them a long time. I think they are sincere in wanting to find common ground. The big question, of course, is there common ground to be found? And I think that's part of what we'll need to determine in the weeks to come. But that was a very productive discussion. So thank you, everyone. Mayor Castleton, I've made notes of your comments about water infrastructure, and we'll make sure that we bring that up in the conversations as well.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. With that, we will go ahead and adjourn. Have a great rest of your day.